Mick Rooney, Radio Espial, investigative journalist and author. As you will have seen from the thumbnail, we're doing a special feature on the murder of Emer O'Loughlin. This is a case from 2005. I'm shortly going to go through just a basic case summary, and then we're going to go into the actual feature. Just incidentally, in case anybody's wondering what's the idea of the yellow and the daffodils, this is to do with the campaign and awareness of Emer O'Loughlin as a studying art and design student. Daffodils were quite a favourite of her to sketch, so that's, in case you're wondering about that, it does have significance. During this feature, occasionally I'm going to come in with just some qualifying points. I want to stress this is a Radio Espial special. It's not a deep dive that I normally do with Kieran into the timeline and we absolutely go through it in thorough detail. This is just somewhere where we tell the story of Emer O'Loughlin. This is Emer O'Loughlin in 2005. She was 23. Let's go into the basic summary of this case. It has an awful lot of oddities, and I'm going to say from the outset, it's better handled now, but in 2005, particularly in the initial days and weeks, it wasn't handled very well, and you're going to see why pretty quickly. Life was good for art student Emer O'Loughlin. At age 23 years, she and her boyfriend, Bowe, had just returned from a dream trip across the world over months that took them through Europe and into Asia. Believe that trip, year-long trip, was in 2004. This is Bowe, her boyfriend. She knew him for a number of years, so they were partners and together and building their life. They came back to Emer's native County Clare, Ireland, in 2005, and the young couple decided to save money for a house and build a life together. Emer's dad, Johnny, that's Johnny there, Johnny O'Loughlin, hauled a mobile home into a picturesque area called Ballybornagh in Clare, in the heart of the Burren. It was a plot of land owned by Emer's boyfriend's family, the Bowe family. She wanted nothing more than to continue her studies in art and design. No sooner had she arrived back in Ireland and she received word that her application had been accepted to the National College of Art and Design, that's the NCAD, in Dublin, and she was excited for the coming year. She had been in, I think, the Galway Mayo Institute of Technology, but this really was a much more prestigious course, and she decided to switch to that when her application was granted. The life of two families changed on Friday, April the 8th. The couple had experienced some power supply issues with the electricity to their mobile home that morning, and just before heading off to work, Shane Bowe suggested that Emer ask the adjacent neighbour in his mobile phone if she could charge her mobile phone until the power was restored in theirs. Less than 2 hours later, Shane would receive a disturbing call from a local friend that there was a serious fire at the mobile home site. Now, Shane had already gone into work. I think it was around 10 a.m. He'd gone into work, and around noon he got word from a neighbour that there was a fire at the mobile home site. He returned to find the burnt out remnants and ashes of a mobile home. Emer couldn't be found in the vicinity of our mobile home. That was still intact. The fire had actually engulfed the neighbour's mobile home, where Shane had suggested she go in and ask could she charge her phone with. That neighbour could also not be located. Within hours later that day, around 5 p.m, as the emergency services, accompanied by Shane and Emer's dad, Johnny, sifted through the remnants of what remained of the burnt out mobile home, their worst fears were realised. But this was only the start of a bizarre series of events in the coming days and weeks, and an 18-year-long hunt for a murderer. I'm going to move to our feature now, and the start of it. This is the story of the murder of Emer O'Loughlin and the pursuit of a suspect across the UK, into continental Europe, and further south down into Africa and Morocco.
On the 8th of April 2005, the country was in mourning. It was the day of Pope John Paul II's burial, and Josephine O'Loughlin was watching the funeral from her bedsit in Dublin. Little did she know that in the sleepy village of Ennistimon, where she'd raised her family, her youngest daughter Emer was also about to meet her tragic end.
Emer was born in 82. Usual bubbly little baby. She was all full of life, jolly, very happy in herself. Always wanted to do things. Followed me everywhere.
She was a very placid child, very outgoing, and very friendly with even other children. And she wasn't what you'd call a disruptive child. Like, if you told her to do something, she'd do it. And if she didn't want to do it, she'd let you know she didn't want to do it.
I moved away when Emer was very young. I moved away to England for work. I used to get frequent reports back about how she was doing at school and how artistic she was. And it was basically happy little girl. And that's how it always came across with her. She was happy. Very happy little girl.
Art was her main thing. No matter what it was, she drew it. From a young age up. There's always something stuck on the wall, got to do with pictures of herself, pictures of something she'd just seen maybe that day. She'd always be sketching. That was her main interest.
She always looked at things differently. Like when it came to her art, like when it comes to me taking photographs, I like to look at things differently. And I think she taught me that. I used to pick up my camera and take a photograph straight at it, at the object, and then she taught me that, no, lie down on the ground. You know, put your head in the muck, you'll have a better photograph, and I still do it.
All the conversations with Emer was always about art. She'd even point out something in my flat, and she'd say, "Ma'am, that doesn't look right." And I say, "Why, what's wrong with it? It doesn't, you know, you should put stickers on this and stickers on that." But that was Emer. Emer created her own environment.
In her late teens, Emer began a relationship with her childhood sweetheart, Shane Bowe.
And it was quite a serious relationship because they had decided to travel together. They'd gone to live in Holland, spent 2 years there. They'd also had a wonderful 3-month holiday in Thailand. So she was a very young woman, 23 years old, and had done a lot in her short life already.
She'd always tell me her stories of when she was in Thailand and when she was here and there, and even photos we have of her when she was away, how relaxed she looked when she was away, and you knew she was happy.
Following their travels, Emer and Shane returned to Ennistimon and began planning their future together.
They had decided they were going to live on a mobile home on land owned by Shane's family. So essentially they were going to save money on rent with a view to building a home.
I remember the first day she got the mobile home. Emma got the mobile home. I actually pulled it in with a Jeep into the site. And that was the happiest day of my life, I'd say. That she wanted something.
She'd take off for her walks, do her sketches, come back, and it was just some place she just loved being.
Emer's personal life had fallen into place, and it wasn't long before her artistic aspirations also began to flourish.
In April 2005, Emer was studying at the Galway Mayo Institute of Technology, and she had already completed a photography course and she was studying art there. But at that stage, she had just got the news in recent times that she was being accepted onto the course at the National College of Art and Design in Dublin, coming up that next September.
In fact, she was even arranging. She said, "Ma'am, if I get there, instead of staying in college, I could be able to stay with you." And I said, "Emer, that'll be brilliant, that'll be great."
In the midst of all Emer's planning came a day that would change the O'Loughlin's lives forever.
The 8th of April 2005 was the day of the funeral of Pope John Paul II, and Bowe Mayo Institute of Technology was closed, and so Emer found herself with a free day.
The electricity in the couple's home wasn't working that morning, and Emer's phone needed to be charged. They discussed the possibility of Emer asking their neighbour if she could plug her phone in at his mobile home, and Shane left for work. It was to be the last time Shane would see Emer alive. Several hours passed, and Shane received a phone call informing him that his neighbour's mobile home was on fire.
By the time he got back, the fire had been going for quite some time, and he contacted Gardaí in Gort, and then the Gardaí in Gort in turn dispatched the Sergeant Patrick Fahey from Kinvara Garda Station to the scene, and he got there at around 4 o'clock.
Arrived, Shane was frantic with worry. He couldn't find Emer anywhere. It was clear that her mobile home, that there was no disturbance there. Her car was there, her keys were there, and 2 dogs that the couple had were also running around the site. Shane pointed out to the sergeant who went there what they believed to be human remains. A doctor confirmed that, and as a result of that then the scene was preserved. It was very clear that the remains were badly charred and damaged by the fire.
At this stage, there was no sign of Emer or the owner of the caravan at the site, and when Emer failed to answer her phone, Shane began to fear the worst.
Well, Shane thought that Emer had gone up to charge her phone, because that was the discussion they'd had that morning, so he was getting more and more concerned. And then Emer's family are arriving at the scene as well, her father and brothers arriving at the scene, none of whom have heard from Emer at all.
There was just a lot of confusion and basically panic going around, because they didn't really know if she was there or not.
I was concerned about Emer because Emer would never go anywhere without her dogs. Say 2 dogs. But the dogs were around.
Her keys were there, her wallet was there. You know, all her usual stuff was as it was. We knew, just looking around, that it wasn't right. Everything was out of character there.
Uncertain as to the identity of the remains, the O'Loughlins searched the vicinity for signs of Emer's whereabouts. With his sister still missing, John volunteered to break the news to his mum and sister.
Drove to Dublin, and I had to in person. I just found you can't get information like that over the phone. So I drove to Dublin, told Mum.
I was sitting beside the bed and he knelt down in front of me and he said, "Ma'am, I've bad news for you." And he just said, there was a fire in another caravan next to Emer's, but Emer can't be found.
Then I had to get on a flight and I flew over to England to my sister, Paula. And that hurt her, like, you know, just to see her break down as well, but like, no one should go through that, no one.
Everything was pointing to it being Emer in the fire, you know, the fact that she was missing and nobody could find her anywhere. I really did fear the worst, and I think I knew straight from the beginning that it was Emer that was in that fire.
Gardaí were anxious to find the owner of the caravan, John Griffin, to establish that the remains were not his.
And it's that night that word comes through that John Griffin has been found in Galway City. So people becoming more and more fearful that it is Emer's body in the mobile home.
The remains found were so badly burnt, it was impossible to tell whether they were male or female. But 4 days after the fire, DNA tests confirmed the O'Loughlin's worst fears. Their beloved Emer was dead.
Now, just to qualify a few points, initially in this Garda investigation, when they went through the remains of the mobile home forensically, and I don't know whether this is mentioned in this feature, what you may not be aware of is that not only was the remains of a body found, but also eventually a traditional Nepalese knife was recovered from the remains of that mobile home. The Gardaí started out with kind of, as you would expect, lines of inquiry. The initial thought seemed to be that this was a terrible tragedy, a fire. When Shane Bowe told him that his understanding was that his partner he'd suggested that his partner go to the neighbour and see if she could charge her phone there that afternoon, that morning. The initial thought was, is it possible that the mobile phone she brought there and had on charge, that somehow that was the cause of the actual fire? As the case proceeded in the coming hours and initial day and a half, 2 days, I suppose, like in all these investigations, attention actually started to focus on Shane Bowe, and he was brought in for questioning. In fact, I think Johnny O'Loughlin, Emer's father, actually quipped in a number of interviews that he actually got a little bit fed up every time he saw Shane. He was in the back of a Garda car being brought for another interview, and his feeling was, all the while, it's the neighbour's home that burnt down. Aren't you looking for the guy who owns that? And indeed, Gardaí were, and they were following up on that, and ultimately they discovered that the mobile home, the neighbour's mobile home, was owned by a man called John Griffin, who claimed that he was miles and miles away that morning and had stayed with a family member, and he was also interviewed by Gardaí, but that pretty much seemed to be it. So it kind of, like, at that stage we can see it's getting ominous. Okay, we found John Griffin, who owns the mobile home that's burnt down. He's fine, he's alive, he wasn't even there. So okay, who does that body belong to? And it, of course, was ominous that it did look like this was Emer's remains, and sadly that's the way it turned out.
2 days later, John Griffin was found on the island of Inishmore, having barricaded himself inside Dunaingus Fort. After some time, Gardaí persuaded Griffin to remove himself from the fort. In the meantime, the post-mortem on Emer O'Loughlin's remains had failed to conclusively reveal the nature of how she died.
The cause of death was unascertainable due to the damage to the body caused by the fire. So the big question was, had the fire caused Emer's death, or had something else caused her death prior to the fire?
Right from the beginning, there was an awful lot of questions about what had happened to Emer, how she ended up where she ended up, how she ended up dead, and just a huge amount of questions which couldn't be answered by anybody at the time.
In the days following her death, Emer's family struggled to come to terms with their loss, and the cause of her death was still unknown to Gardaí. Meanwhile, John Griffin was once again spotted on Inishmore.
Local Gardaí received a call to indicate that the entrance to the Dunaingus Fort was again barricaded in a similar fashion to what had happened the previous week. And on going there, they found a pile of Mr. Griffin's clothes stacked neatly on the cliff edge.
Initially, people would naturally assume that perhaps John Griffin had come to some harm either on land or may have entered the water below. So this was fully investigated by Gardaí. There were a number of searches along Inishmore and along the Galway coastline, and there was no trace of John Griffin in the water. The only trace of John Griffin on Inishmore is that set of clothes at the top of the cliff.
Having found no trace of a body, John Griffin is presumed alive, and Gardaí are still anxious to locate him.
The investigating Gardaí have circulated the descriptive particulars of John Griffin locally, nationally and internationally, and that he is sought for interview by Gardaí.
Meanwhile, Emer's family were preparing to bury their youngest born.
We went up as a family to Galway to pick Emer's body up. And obviously, because of the way that she died and the nature of her death, we couldn't obviously have an open coffin.
And I think it was Pamela. Yeah, it was Pamela that told me, "Ma'am, the coffin won't be opened." And there again, stupid as I was, I said, "Why not?" You know, I said, "Why not? Why can't I see her?"
Emer's funeral was difficult.
And to give her friends somewhere where they could leave their memories of Emer, but also any information regarding the case, any information regarding what had been found, could be communicated out there, basically.
So, John Griffin is now on his fleeing escapades. And I guess, in relation to the early Gardaí investigation, in those first 10 days, is after he was admitted to a psychiatric unit, why were they not keeping tabs on him as clearly a prime suspect in the case? And we may never get answers to that, but that was a clear misstep by Gardaí at that stage, that Griffin could effectively sign himself out of the psychiatric unit and disappear to the UK, we believe initially to London, Scotland and many further places afield over many years.
In 2010, the investigation made progress following advice from the Serious Crime Review team.
During the review of the case, the Serious Crime Review team produced a number of recommendations in order to assist the Senior Investigating Officer in progressing the case. One of those recommendations was to carry out an exhumation of the remains of Emer O'Loughlin.
As a result of our contact with the Serious Crime Review team, they put us in touch with Miss Laureen Buckley, a forensic anthropologist who had begun to work with the state pathologist And as a result of her expertise and opinion, we applied to the coroner for County Clare to have an exhumation order issued.
When we heard that they wanted to exhume her body, it was obviously quite an emotional time, but nobody had any hesitation in giving the go-ahead for it, because we felt that it might give us answers, it might give us a little bit more to go on, so we agreed straight away.
Her remains were then taken to Galway University Hospital for a second post-mortem, which was conducted by Dr. Mike Curtis and Dr. Lorraine Buckley. As a result of this second post-mortem examination, it was established that Emer O'Loughlin had suffered a violent death prior to the starting of the fire at the caravan.
We'd always believed that Emer was more than, because Emer would put up a fight. Emer had never backed down from anything.
Having confirmed that Emer O'Loughlin had died in a violent manner, the case was upgraded to a murder investigation, and the need to speak to the owner of the burnt-out mobile home became all the more urgent. In 2011, Crime Stoppers issued a reward to anyone offering information on the whereabouts of John Griffin.
Gardaí described John Griffin as somebody who was sought for interview with, somebody who they very much wished to speak with in relation to what happened at Ballybornagh, what happened to Emer O'Loughlin in April 2005, and they've never been able to fully speak with him. And the fact that he went missing within 2 weeks of Emer's body being found in his mobile home meant that they never got to sit down and have a detailed discussion with him.
In the intervening years since the death of Emer O'Loughlin, there have been a number of sightings of a person described as being John Griffin, and one in particular, it was in Germany, were investigated. But to date, none of those sightings have been substantiated.
And perhaps that's the way he may be found, through public appeals and through the wider community keeping an eye out, studying this man's photograph and looking out for him. And perhaps the public can solve the mystery of the whereabouts of John Griffin.
Beyond the basic, I suppose, misinformation in this case, and the newspaper reports were also featuring a lot of the misconceptions and misinformation being communicated by the Gardaí. And this even got to the level of Interpol, when Griffin had got to, they believed, from the UK to continental Europe. Now, I know you can't fully see the details up here, but I'll read them for you. The body of the 23-year-old victim was discovered in the burnt-out caravan where she had been living. That's not the case. Her body was found in the neighbour John Griffin's mobile home. It is suspected that Griffin set fire to the caravan after breaking in and assaulting the woman. Again, that's not accurate. And one wonders, as Interpol is a European and global security force, where were they getting that information? And it only had to be coming from the initial Gardaí investigation team. Now, whether something was lost in communication and specific details, they were crucial things. The other aspect was Griffin's description. There's no mention of tattoos. He had a very distinctive tattoo here. It's called the Eye of Horus. It's Egyptian. In later bulletins, it was communicated as a Celtic inscription on the tattoo. And, you know, details like that are just staggeringly poor of the early investigation and how it communicated and worked with forces within Scotland, the wider UK and continental Europe.
Emer's family have had good support from the local community in the Ballybornagh area, and indeed a cross has been erected to her memory at the site where she died. and every year locals commemorate her there.
You miss her around the place. And then we always talk about her, all the family. Even I have a son, he's only 10 years of age. He can't pass the graveyard. We have to call in. He's always talking about her, even at school.
Even though she had gone up to 23 years, to me, she was always a child. She was always a baby, you know what I mean? My baby.
In the 8 years since Emer died, I've often wondered what she'd be doing now if she was still alive. Would she have kids? Would she be living in the house that she was planning to build with her long-term boyfriend? I do wonder if she would have stayed with her art. Would it have been something she would have pursued? Would she have become well-known as an artist? And there's so many things that we're going to miss out on over the next few, years to come because Emer was taken away from us, really.
But I do feel angry because Emer's killer is still out there, and this could happen to another family. It's not just about us. Might get our closure, we might get our answers, but somebody else's family could go through this.
Which I've done for the last 8 years, and I'll never make sense of what happened, and I'll never understand what happened, and it'll never connect with me until we get justice.
Okay, so we come to the end of our feature. Just some details I want to add in. Some of them might be considered positive. I'm afraid some also sad news for you. Emer's mother passed away in 2015, so she will never have the answers to what exactly happened to her daughter. Before we talk about this clown, sadly, only researching this case, I also discovered that Shane also passed away in 2018 at quite a young age. For privacy reasons, I'm not going into that. Back to our clown. John Griffin, as you will have seen, having tried to fake his own death in 2005 on an island off the coast, is believed to have initially fled to London, and it's known that for a period of time he lived with the homeless community in Scotland. He's used various nicknames and aliases. Fozzie Griffin, yeah, where did that come from? John McDermott. He traversed from the UK into Germany, the Netherlands and later Spain. He continues to this day, 2023, to elude Irish and international crime forces, and by 2022-23 was reported to have been spotted in Morocco. Now, in recent years, this case has only begun to have a little bit more exposure with that feature you've seen. I think there was another one done on Irish TV, TG Car, as they call it, TG4. The fact Griffin fled to Northern Africa is probably likely because he's aware Ireland does not have an extradition treaty with Morocco. And here's another thing you won't have heard. As far back as the murder of Emer O'Loughlin, John Griffin was known to Gardaí for violent behaviour against women in the areas of Clare and Galway. In regards to his escapades and escape, Gardaí know, at least, someone close to Griffin helped him escape County Clare in 2005. But those people will not speak up now, and he's likely receiving the same assistance to evade authorities after 18 years, near or far away. Those people need to come forward and prevent another potential murder, because this guy is dangerous, and that's if it's not already happened. Thank you for joining me in this feature. I will see you soon for another case. Hopefully it will be a more in-depth timeline case with Kieran. Take care of each other. God bless.